Welcome to a first episode of the Avichail Show in companion with The Fourth Branch. The Fourth Branch is a podcast, and I am the producer of The Fourth Branch. So together, the Avichail Show, which is me and my wife as the producer, together with The Fourth Branch, have this special show today. We're going to be talking about who I am voting for in the 2022 November election. Now, I know that these opinions can very well get me ostracized by my community. My community are very strong Republicans. They're strong conservatives. So any toe out of the conservative line will definitely get me labeled as a socialist, an enemy of the people, and a perverter of children. So I know the stakes that are here, and I want to hopefully walk through each person that I'm voting for as to why I'm voting for them. I did a little bit of a deep dive into each candidate that's going to be on the ballot. I think the only, first of all, the election that the ballot that I'll be voting on is in New York State. So it's going to be all New York local elections. The only one that won't be statewide will be the U.S. Congress candidate, and we'll get to talk about who's running and why I'm voting for who I am voting for. But first, I just want to thank everyone for watching this, and tell your friends if you enjoy this to also watch it. I'm very open for questions. Please send me a question if you feel like you want me to clarify something, or if you argue with me on a certain point. Totally open for questions. Please. Maybe on the next episode I can go through a mailbag and talk about all the things that everyone would be interested in hearing from me for whatever reason. I don't know why you would want to hear from me per se, but you can hear my opinion. But today we're going to be discussing the ballot, the New York ballot, and we're going to start with the first. So there's going to be the people you're voting for, right? So a lot of times elections sort of get lost in who is running for office as opposed to other things that are pertaining to the state. So on this ballot on November 8th, or if you're early voting, on this ballot there will be one proposal, which means that the assembly in Albany, in the state of New York, in the Capitol, have decided that they want the people to decide on a certain measure. This is done by saying a proposal. So there's going to be one proposal on the ballot and three questions also on the ballot that they're asking the people their opinion. The proposal is more legislatively important. So depending on what the people vote for, that is what the Congress, the assembly will vote on or will pass. And then the questions are more suggestive. They're not really in the hands of the people as much as getting the people's opinion, sort of like a poll. So the first proposal is, I'm just going to read the ballot title for proposal number 1. It is to address and combat the impact of climate change and damage to the environment. The, quote, Clean Act, Clean Air, and Green Jobs Environmental Bond Act of 2022 authorizes the sale of state bonds up to $4.2 billion to fund environmental protection, natural restoration, resiliency, and clean energy projects. Shall the Environmental Bond Act of 2022 be approved? That is the ballot title. That is the ballot title. That is the question that's going to be asked to the citizens who are going to be voting on this. Now, let's just break this down for a second. What does all this even mean? So, first of all, what is a bond? So, it's very important you understand what a bond is. A bond is simply a loan that usually it's the state or the government, but it could be a company also, but many times it's the state or the government that wants to wants to create something. Usually, let's say it's infrastructure, right? In this case, it's the Clean Act, right? They want to make some infrastructure. They want to create infrastructure on the buildings or create some clean infrastructure sort of projects in the state. So, but that infrastructure is money. It's very expensive. So what they need is, the state says, we need money to make these projects. So what are we going to do? We're going to issue bonds, which means that we're going to tell people, look, if you lend us, let's say $1,000, if you lend us $1,000, we'll pay you interest on that $1,000 that you lend us. And we're going to use that $1,000 that you lend us to create infrastructure. And that infrastructure is going to make us back the money so that in 10 years from now, when the bond expires, we'll then pay you, give you back the $1,000 that you lent to us, and you have the interest. So again, think of a bond as a loan. And what this is asking for is asking the people of New York, would you approve New York State to ask to issue bonds? In fact, how much? $4.2 billion worth of bonds. Would you, the citizens, allow the state to issue that many bonds in order to create environmental projects and clean energy environmental projects? Now, so regarding this, we have two parties, one arguing for the measure, one arguing for the proposal, and one arguing against the proposal. We're just going to read a little bit of those who are arguing for the proposal. The Clean Water, Clean Air, and Green Jobs Bond Act. This is who? Julie Tai, president of the New York League of Conservation Voters. So she says this initiative would authorize $4.2 billion in state spending to safeguard clean air and water, preserve farmland and natural space, and upgrade our infrastructure system. The Bond Act will fund projects to replace dangerous lead pipes, make critical infrastructure updates, from upgrading our sewers, fixing roads, and retrofitting buildings, and expanding clean energy. It would also create and expand parks and green spaces. The measure will support family farms and provide funds for improved soil health. All these projects require skilled labor, and the measure will support nearly 100,000 good local and family-sustaining jobs. So the question, when I'm reading an argument for this ballot measure, especially one that has to do with bonds, I am specifically looking for, will this project make the state back its money, right? Because if the state's going to be taking a loan, I want to know that the state is going to be able to pay back the loan. If the state, right, because the loan's going to come due one day, and when this loan comes due, will the state have money to pay back that loan? If the state's spending, the classic example is the government wants to create a baseball field, right? Because if they create a baseball field, then teams will come and they'll play, the games will produce profit. They will use that profit to pay back the loan that they borrowed from the people, right? So that's why when I look at this ballot measure, I'm asking myself, is the state going to spend this bond money on projects that will return money back to them, that will make them a profit? Reading this argument for the ballot, for this proposal, does not convince me that the state is going to be able to pay back these bonds with this infrastructure project. So I'm a little hesitant right now, but let's see the argument against. The argument against, it's specifically by the Conservative Party. Gerald Kosser says the New York State Conservative Party cares about environmental conservation, but it also cares about working and middle-class families that are having trouble making ends meet. Almost 1.5 million financially beleaguered New York families have fled the state for friendlier tax climates. Right, because this person is arguing against. Why are they arguing against? Because they're saying that New York State is not going to be able to get back enough money in order to pay back these bonds. So what's going to end up happening is that New York State is going to have to raise taxes in order to get back money to pay back these bonds, which is why the Conservative Party is arguing against this proposal. And I think I agree with them. I would argue with this proposal and say, no, I will not be voting for proposal number 1 on the ballot. All right, let's move on. So then we have questions. So we have question 1, 2, and 3. The questions are going to be fairly straightforward, so let's just rush right through them. The ballot title of ballot question number 1 is as follows. This proposal will amend the New York City Charter. So what is the New York City Charter? It is, you can think of the New York City Charter as the Constitution of New York City. When New York City was was made into a city. They had a constitution, and the constitution, just like the United States Constitution, has a preamble, and the following would be added to the preamble of the New York City Charter. It would say, add a preamble which would, I'm sorry. First of all, this ballot, the question is actually, first, could we actually add a preamble? The New York City Charter doesn't currently have a preamble. Could we add a preamble? And in the preamble, which would have an introductory statement of values and vision aspiring toward, and it would say, a just and equitable city for all New Yorkers. And include in the preamble a statement that the city must strive to remedy, quote, past and continuing harms, and to reconstruct, revise, and reimagine our foundations, structures, institutions, and laws to promote justice and equity for all New Yorkers. So I hear this concept of equity. First of all, what does equity mean? Equity means that there are people who do very well, and there are people who are not doing so well. So in order to help those people not doing so well, we have to pull the people not doing so well up, usually using the profits, or at least to tax the people who are doing well, tax them, meaning take from the people who are doing well, give it to the people who are not doing so well. And while, yes, you may come down a little bit, even though they would argue it's not so much and you're coming down because your profits are so high, but let's say we come down a little bit and pull up these people a little bit. That's equity, to help those who are disadvantaged, bring them up by using the success of those who are advantaged and to help bring them up. So the concept of equity, I think, is debatable whether it's good or not. I hear more that it's not so good because we're taking something that when someone succeeds, we like to reward those people. We don't want to say, oh, you're successful, therefore we're going to punish you and say that you must help these other people. It's sort of like you're trying to force righteousness on someone. I don't think that usually works, and I wouldn't necessarily, I don't think I like it so much. But what really bothers me about this question is that it says that the city must strive to remedy, quote, past and continuing harms. So it sounds like what we're saying is that the successful have to remedy the past harms, meaning harms that were done by somebody else. The current successful people have to now almost like remedy the harms that were done by other people, which I don't like at all. I don't think current people should be paying for the sins of the past. So on this ballot question, it ends off saying, shall this proposal be adopted? I would vote no. So that's a no on question 1 on the ballot. Now let's go to question 2. Question 2 says, this proposal would amend the city charter to, so again, the city charter is the constitution of the city. So this would actually add an amendment to the actual city charter, and it would say like this. It would require citywide and agency-specific racial equity plans every 2 years. The plans would include intended strategies and goals to improve racial equity and to reduce or eliminate racial disparities. So I don't like that language, eliminate racial disparities. Who's to say what causes a disparity? Is it necessarily something that the city can remedy? And I'm a little afraid to give the government the power to flatten out a disparity that isn't necessarily because of race, honestly. Like, who knows if a disparity is based off of race? I'm not sure. And establish an office of racial equity and appoint a chief equity officer. It just sounds a lot like basically putting everyone into boxes of race. And I don't like distinguishing people based off of race, because that is literally the definition of racism, is to distinguish people based off of race is the definition of racism. So I'm going to vote no on question number 2. Let's see question number 3. All right, question number 3. This proposal would amend the city charter, another amendment to the city constitution, require the city to create a true cost of living measure to track the actual cost in New York City of meeting essential needs, including housing, food, childcare, transportation, other necessary costs, without considering public, private, or informal assistance, in order to inform programmatic and policy decisions, and require the government to report annually on the true cost of living measure. So this would simply just create a new way of measuring things, and it would what the city would be measuring is the cost of living in the city. So on its surface, that sounds pretty good, but then I see the bottom. I see who supports this question, and I get a little hesitant. So who supports this ballot question? The Racial Justice Commission. The proposed true cost of living calculation is necessary first steps towards economic justice. The measure could be utilized in advocacy, labor negotiations, and where appropriate, settling new eligibility standards for programs and benefits. So if the Racial Justice Commission is going to be in charge for saying who is eligible for programs and benefits, and they're going to be distinguishing based on race as to who can be the benefactor of certain programs and benefits of the city, I do not like that. And I don't want any part of it. And I'm going to be voting no on question 3. So I am voting no on proposal number 1 and questions 1 through 3. Let's move on. Now we're going to actually get to the people who are running for office and what they stand for and who I'm going to be voting for. So we have the incumbent, Grace Meng. Well, first of all, I'm in District 6. So in New York City, you have to look up your own district if you're in a different part of New York City. My district, the congressional representative, again, the congressional representative is the person who my district sends to the federal government to represent my district. Okay, so district number 6 is currently represented by Grace Meng. She's an Asian woman who has been in this office for more than a decade now. She is a classic Democrat. She votes basically with the Democrats every time. She is not a rabble-rouser. She is not a radical in any way. She votes straight down, Democrat usually. But interestingly enough, this past year in 2022, she actually voted against the National Defense Authorization Act. She voted against the bipartisan Defense Authorization Act. So that means that first of all, the bill passed 363 to 70, which means she didn't necessarily need to stand against this bill. It was going to pass. So her standing against the bill is more of a symbolic move as opposed to actually trying to get the bill voted against. So why was she against it? And it seems like she's against anything regarding war, anything regarding, while defense does sound like it is defense, many times defense actually is weapons of destruction that are sent to other countries. And I mean, in this case, many of the weapons that we're sending to Ukraine actually was funded by the National Defense Authorization. So much for defense as much as maybe offense in a proxy war in the Ukraine. That's a different topic. But she voted against that. So, and I like that. I like that at least symbolically she is against weapons of war. And I do think that there is a tremendous amount of the budget for defense goes towards actually making war in other countries. So I agree with her on that, and otherwise I'm not too perturbed by the fact that she votes with Democrats on every other thing. So I'm not too perturbed. But this other thing that I saw, which was interesting, was that Meng was the first. This is about the Iran nuclear deal. Meng was the first Democratic member of the U.S. House to speak in opposition of the Finnish-Iran nuclear deal. She actually voted against her party. Her party voted for the Iran nuclear deal. She actually voted against it, and she was the first Democratic House member to vote against it, which I like also because I don't think that deal was particularly good. I think it sort of made the Iran nuclear deal into a kitchen like being checked by the what is it called? Inspection. The Iran nuclear deal basically made the Iran nuclear program into a kitchen inspection, and I didn't like that. So the fact that she voted against it, I'm good with. Now, who's running against her? Who's running against her is a guy named Thomas Zmich. Now, Thomas Zmich is most probably not going to be voted into office because he honestly doesn't have so much backing him in this district. He's a regular old-fashioned union conservative guy. He doesn't really, it's not really clear what he stands for as much as he just stands against Mang. So doesn't have much running for him. But let's play an ad that he has on his website.
I want to talk about why I support Tom Schmitch for Congress.
This is a very low budget campaign video. What does it say? We need rent. Something.
Heard what I had to say.
Pause that. Pause that. As a registered Democrat, I believe the Democratic Party has been taken over by radicals and is no longer democratic. I will now vote Republican until the Dems heal themselves. So again, I don't think Grace Meng is a radical. So not so perturbed. Let's play it.
He heard that I was trying to bring together both sides.
I'm not sure who's talking, by the way. It's some random radio guy.
And he got behind me and he supported me.
Okay, we got some pro-police flags. You got a guy with a bullhorn. Radio guy doesn't sound so convincing. He's thumbs-upping with a bunch of people. More bullhorn. Leftist socialist ideas. Oh, it's Thomas Jefferson. So, pause it. He's basically running against the people in the city. The thing is, Grace, I don't know why he's running for Congress then, because Grace Meng has nothing, I mean, she represents the 6th district, but she's not involved in the going-ons of the city. So he's running against the people in City Hall, but he's running for Congress. This guy doesn't know how government works, apparently. All right, so it's pretty apparent to say that I will be voting for Grace Meng in this race. Again, she's a Democrat, and she's running for the 6th district. That's who I am voting for. Now we're going to move on to the U.S. Senate. Right now, the incumbent is Chuck Schumer. Let's get a picture of him up here. Look at this guy, Jewish guy. You could just say, he just looks like he's just a Jewish face. It's not racist because I'm Jewish. But he's been in the Senate for like a billion years. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, first of all, he's also the leader of the Senate Majority Party, and he basically directs the voting in the Congress. And I'm actually, look, I think the Democratic Party right now is very united. It's very resilient with the radical part of the Democratic Party. So we're talking about like AOC and Rashida Tlaib and all those people who like really want like true and honest communism and socialism. They want to sort of just like totally take over the United States and reconstruct everybody's paycheck. And I have to hand it to Chuck Schumer for really like fighting against them, like not allowing the party and the country to slide in that direction. But in the end of the day, you can't stop that train that's coming. So he's a bit corrupt. He's a bit more of like a swamp creature, they call him. But I'm not too fascinated by this guy who's running against him, Joe Pinion. Joe Pinion, this man over here. He's from Brooklyn. He's got a nice nose, and I know something about nice noses. So this guy definitely has a nice nose. And he looks like, he took a picture of himself in front of his house, which I guess is nice, but like, he's sort of like, that guy who spent like millions of dollars on his campaign and like wants to look like he's a kid from New York. And that's what he looks like, a kid from New York. But he basically cut an ad against Chuck Schumer that I want to play because I think it's a bit hilarious, and I don't know the amount of money that he spent on this ad. But let's play this. Let's see what this guy has to say. Chuck Schumer is a dinosaur, and on his watch, okay, pause it. Okay, cheesy, very cheesy. Again, the American dream is about to go extinct, like the dinosaurs that are in his video, he's next to. I mean, it looks like a superhero video, and like, how can I take you seriously if you're cutting videos that make you look like you're in a superhero movie? I'm not taking you seriously. Let's play it. I can't vote for you for Senate if I can't take you seriously.
It's true. You're in debt.
You are.
42 years.
Wow, 42 years. I didn't know Chuck Schumer was in for 42 years.
And what do we have to show for us?
Yeah, what do we have?
Inflation that is bankrupt.
Okay, pause it. I'd like to actually talk about inflation for a second. Okay. I am very upset about this. In 2020 and in 2021, everyone got checks. And everyone was so excited about what they're going to do and how they're going to spend their checks. Now, I understand if you were unemployed, if you were fired from your job, if you didn't have a job during 2020, I understand those checks for you. But if you had a job, or if you never wanted to be employed in the first place, you just got $3,200 from the US government to then spend on Bitcoin and whatever other nonsense you wanted to spend on, and now you're crying about inflation? It's your fault there's inflation. It's your fault. Your representatives voted for those checks, the ones you voted for, and then you got them and you spent them. So don't go crying now about inflation. I don't know this Joe Pinion guy. I don't know if he got a check from the government, but it's very likely he did, and it's very likely he spent that money that he got from the government. He can't now stand here and cry about inflation. I remember when those checks were going out, and I'm not going to say that that you should have listened to me then. I'm not going to say that, but I was going around telling people, you're going to pay for this. This is not free money. There's no free money. It's your debt right now is going like this. Your debt is going to come like this one day, and it's now with inflation. All that money that you're spending on all the extra oil and all the extra gas and everything that's flying off the handle, that's your money that you spent, that you should have saved or at least paid off your debt with, because that was the point of that money, to pay off your debts, not to spend it on nonsense. It's very upsetting to hear about inflation, especially from Republicans who yell about inflation when they voted in for these checks that caused inflation. They voted in, and then they retro, it's the Biden inflation because he cut all this spending stuff, and he wants to pass all these bills and spending, and he wanted to do the better Build Back Better bill, which didn't pass, by the way, and that caused inflation because of all of his spending. And it's like, guys, you did the spending. We spent $4 trillion during COVID. Now, you want to argue that was necessary or not, fine, whatever it is, but now you take the consequences. Don't say, we have to vote the party that's now in office out of office because of inflation. We all voted for this. We all voted for the money that's being spent now. You can't cry about inflation and then say you have to vote for me because I can get rid of inflation. You can't get rid of inflation. You know what's going to get rid of inflation? By the way, you know what's getting rid of inflation? The Federal Reserve, by raising interest rates, which everyone's yelling about. And by the way, whose administration is the Federal Reserve raising interest rates under? Oh, that's right, Joe Biden. So you want to say Joe Biden is causing inflation while the Joe Biden administration is literally the one raising interest rates with cutting back on inflation? You're running against the party that is supporting the Fed, which is raising interest rates, which lowers inflation. You're running against them because you think that you're going to be able to solve inflation, which the only thing that solves inflation is really two things. Raising the interest rates, which is one, and time. So yeah, by the time 2024 comes around, you're going to be able to say, look at inflation lowered during the time that we were elected. No, it didn't get lowered because you were in the House or you were in the Senate. It was lowered because that's what happens. That's what happens when you raise interest rates. Inflation gets lowered, and that's it. So I am very upset because it's like, guys who are voting for Republicans and listen to these Republican arguments about inflation, you're being fooled. You're being fooled. You're being scared into voting for people because they're tricking you into voting for them. They're saying that you should vote for them because of crime, which we're going to get to in a little bit about the whole crime thing, and and on inflation. They can't do anything about the inflation. The money is in the system already. The only thing that you could do is time and raise interest rates, which the Democrats are allowing. They're allowing for interest rates to rise, even though that cuts against their interest. Even though that raises inflation, which is against their interest, because high inflation is bad for elections. You're being tricked by the Republican Party because they're saying that we're the victim. They're calling you a victim, and you people who are voting with the Republicans because you feel like a victim are doing the same exact thing that you accuse all the hardcore left people about being oppressed. You are voting based off of your perceived oppression. You are. And you should stop and look at the issues and think for a second that, oh, maybe the inflation was caused because we took that free money 2 years ago. That's all I got to say about that. Play. Crime. We're going to get to crime soon. Schools are failing our children. Career politicians. Doping.
And I'm running for U.S. Senate against Chuck Schumer because the old ways will no longer do.
Oh, back up. Again, I'm Joe Pinion. I'm running against Chuck Schumer. Why? Because the old ways won't do. Aren't you a conservative? Conservative means you conserve the old ways. So you're against the old ways, or are you pro the old ways? Whatever. Guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He spent $2 million on this ad.
It's over. It's time to save our country. It is time to fight Chuck Schumer.
Okay, I hope that $2 million was worth something. Anyways, not voting for Chuck Schumer. I'm not voting for Joe Pinion. I am instead voting for Diane Sare. Now, everyone listening to this is like, who the heck is Diane Sare? A little, not very well-known candidate who's running for U.S. Senate in New York, Diane Sare. She looks like a Ayn Rand character. She looks like Dagny Taggart. Like, if I would envision what Dagny Taggart would look like, it would look like her. You know, short blonde hair, green eyes. Yeah, basically. Anyway, who is she? She is part of the LaRouche. She's a LaRouche candidate, and for those who know New York politics, know about the LaRouche Party. But those who don't know about New York politics, the LaRouche Party were these very controversial people who their main thing that they ran against was war and global warming and all the other stuff. But the reason why I'm voting for her is because she's literally the only anti-war candidate running for U.S. Senate. Anti-war spending, anti-military spending. So that is exactly why I am voting for Diane Sare. Diane Sare. All right, moving on to the Attorney General. So Letitia James is the incumbent Attorney General. Here she is, Letitia James. So she's caused a lot of controversy because she has all sorts of lawsuits against Donald Trump, and people say she's soft on crime. And okay, first of all, what is the Attorney General? Let's talk about what is the Attorney General first. So the Attorney General responsibilities. This is put very simply: issuing formal opinions to state agencies, acting as a public advocate, proposing legislation, enforcing federal and state environmental laws, representing the state and state agencies before the state and federal courts, handling criminal appeals and serious statewide criminal prosecutions, instituting civil suits on behalf of the state, representing the public's interest in charitable trust and solicitations, and operating victim compensation and programs. So that is what the Attorney General does. And again, the Attorney General, think of the Attorney General as the state's lawyer. The state's lawyer, they're sort of like the top cop. They are in charge of laws and making sure laws are being kept. So Letitia James is being yelled at by a lot of the people on the right because they feel like she is soft on crime and is not doing the duties of the Attorney General. Now, I looked into her, and I don't necessarily find too much evidence of that. And we'll talk about New York City crime in a couple minutes, but I don't really see how she is particularly against prosecuting against crime. She seems to be actually very strong on crime, and we can go to her. She actually. So the one thing that a lot of the people on the right sort of yell at her for is this lawsuit that she filed against the New York City Police Department. Yes, if you could open that file, the lawsuit. So what happened here? So she filed a lawsuit against the New York City Police Department. In the complaint, Attorney General James outlines the New York Police Department's illegal and harmful conduct against New Yorkers during the recent racial justice protests and for years prior, which led to significant injuries and violated individuals' basic right to peaceful protest. So a lot of people are yelling at her because those protests resulted in a lot of damage to businesses and also to a lot of people being arrested and protesters being arrested maybe for not so justifiable grounds. So that's what a lot of people are yelling at her for. And I hear, look, it was a very chaotic time. So to say that it was necessarily the New York Police Department did a bad job or the protesters did a lot of damage, which I'm sure they both did terrible things. I'm not going to say that the police were necessarily perfect. I think they probably did the best that they can do with what they can do, but it wasn't a completely clean scene. So I don't know necessarily if I would agree with this lawsuit that she is filing against the New York Police Department. But besides that, I think she did several other things that I like, and I have to balance that out. If you could scroll up to the top, you'll see initiatives. So one of her initiatives is actually this thing called Open Government. Scroll down. Here, NY for Open Government. Yeah, NY Open Government. This is an initiative that she actually headed, and what it is a complete transparency in how the New York government works. Who's getting paid? What are the campaign contributions, the campaign expenses, the contracts, the lobbying clients, and the exact amount of dollars to the exact amount of people in this state. And I like that. I am a very big fan of that. And the fact that she did that, I think, is very anti-corruption. So I like that. And I like that she initiated that. And that's kudos to her. And I think she did a good job with that. And again, yes, she is, seemingly and allegedly against the police. She's not supporting the police in their time of need. And I hear that. But I have to also look at the other things she did. And I think there are other things that she did that are pretty good. But let's go see the guy who's running against her. So the guy running against her, his name is Michael Henry. Michael Henry, this guy looks like he's a part-time model. He has no attorney general experience. And I don't know if necessarily I can vote for somebody who has absolutely no experience, not attorney general experience, has no experience at any of the things that it takes to be an attorney general. In fact, I wasn't so impressed when you looked at his website. You look at about him, first of all. We'll read about him a little bit. So you just scroll down over here. It says, Michael Henry is the son of a retired Mount Vernon detective and surgery center manager from the Bronx. He knows that hard work leads to accomplishment. But this opportunity is eroding in New York because a crime crisis is crippling every part of this state. Every day, victim-generating laws mean working-class people fear the streets. He decided to use his hard-earned experience to save our state and run for attorney general. He is dedicated in fighting crime, corruption, and rising cost of living in New York. Okay, let's go to the issue. Right, so he talks about crime, right? He keeps talking about crime in New York, and he wants to take away crime in New York. So let's go to the issues in his website. So first of all, when you go to issues on his website, it's like 3 prompts. The first prompt says crime, And it says, while New York faces a crime crisis, the current AG sued the NYPD and introduced legislation that would make it harder for law enforcement to do their jobs. How can you be chief law enforcement officer in the state when you don't believe in law enforcement? That's all. That's all it says about crime. He doesn't say any plans. He doesn't say how he's going to fix anything. He just complains about the current AG. And then next, corruption. Michael will root out corruption and restore professionalism in the office of the Attorney General. For far too long, the office has been weaponized in service of political ambition. Michael is a professional attorney, not a career politician. No plans about how to root it out. Nothing about... He just cries about corruption, which, by the way, seems like Letitia James made our government very transparent with this open NY for open government. So I'm not sure what corruption he wants to root out exactly. And then cost of living, New York leads the nation in population loss because of one-party rule in Albany. The cost of living, I'm not sure what that has to do with cost of living. Whatever, the point is, I'm not too interested in this guy. So he did not make himself a person worthy of my vote. And therefore, and while Letitia James seems to be backing initiatives that I actually like, again, I don't like this lawsuit against the New York Police Department, but I think there are other things that balance it out, especially the transparency and especially her openness to her open. Yeah, there maybe are some political lawsuits that she's doing, especially with Trump and whatnot. Again, not truly fazed by that, and I'm going to be actually voting for Letitia James in this election. So now we're going to be moving on. Letitia James for Attorney General. Moving on, we're going to go to the comptroller. We're just going to do this real quick. Basically, the comptroller is in charge of the finances and the accounting of the state. The incumbent is, not this guy, the other guy. The incumbent is Thomas DiNapoli. Here he is. He looks like a robot. And the guy running against him is Paul Rodriguez, who does not look like a robot. So I'll be voting for Paul Rodriguez. Not because he doesn't look like a robot, but the fact that the proposal number one basically shows how New York is not at all responsible with its money. You don't take loans if you don't know how you're going to pay them back. If you have no plan for paying them back, and especially if what you're building is not going to make you a profit so that you could pay back your loans. And the fact that New York is going to be issuing bonds to try to make more infrastructure, and that was headed by the incumbent, the robot guy, means I'm not voting for him. I'm going to vote for Paul Rodriguez for comptroller. Paul Rodriguez for comptroller. And now, the race we've all been waiting for, the governor. So, this governor's race is very, very high stakes because New York has been historically very Democrat in the party control. Albany are all Democrats. That means the assembly in New York State are all Democrats. And the governor of New York has been a Democrat for a very long time. And finally, in this race, it seems like the Republicans will be able to take back that office. And originally, when I was thinking about who I was going to vote for, it was Lee Zeldin. In fact, I wrote who I'm going to be voting for on this piece of paper a few weeks ago, and I wrote over here, Governor Lee Zeldin. That's who I'm going to be voting for. Lee Zeldin for governor. And, you can't see it, it's not clear? No, it doesn't zoom in. Lee Zeldin, whatever, trust me, it says Lee Zeldin on here, okay? And I was going to vote for him for governor. And then I watched the debate. So first, let's meet the candidates. So we have Kathy Hochul, or Hochul. She 100% looks like a lizard. 1,000% looks like she just crawled out of the swamp and is just going to eat all the people because of her alligator face. And it's a little scary. It's a little terrifying. No? No? Okay. Well, Lee Zeldin doesn't necessarily look any better. He just looks like a baby who just like crawled out of a hospital after being born. He's just like, yeah, make me governor. That's what he looks like. So based off of looks, I would say neither of them. But then I watched the debate, and first of all, I freaking hate politicians. I hate politicians. And I'm about to show you one reason why I hate politicians. but like one example of why politicians are the smarmiest, the like most brattish, most like they like talk and act like spoiled milk. Like if spoiled milk would climb out of the refrigerator and like grow arms and legs, they would look like a politician. They just like, they're just like, I hate politicians so much. And here's one reason. So Lee Zeldin, he is a congressman, but Kathy Hochul has been in the business for much longer. It's very apparent. And here's an example why. We'll watch the opening statements.
Education, you're poorer and less safe because of Kathy Hochul and extreme policies. This is your opportunity to save New York. Over the course of this next hour, you'll get to hear a clear contrast between the two of us as far as our vision for this state. If you're tired of soaring crime, DAs that let violent criminals out on the street to roam free, crushing taxes and skyrocketing costs, New Yorkers struggling to feed their families and heat
It's
their
all
homes,
gonna cry to panic.
you deserve better.
Vote for me.
Thank you.
Now Kathy Hochul.
Next is Kathy Hochul.
Well, nice to see you too as well, Lisa. It's looking forward to this conversation.
What
Thank
a
you to
smart
Spectrum and
face.
Pace University for hosting this debate, this conversation. But it's all about the people tuning in here
All
tonight.
about you, the
I've
people.
been your governor at the highest time of my life the last 14 months.
Oh.
Every single day I wake up
Oh.
and fight harder for
Every
you
day.
and your families, to invest in education
Oh.
for your kids, give you
Go
more childcare
back to the
opportunities get
swamp.
back to your
Pause it.
jobs.
Smarm. First, Lee Zeldin's up there. We're all gonna die. You're gonna die. I'm gonna die. The people. We're all gonna die. And Kathy Hochul. Well, thank you for that. And I'd like to thank everybody else for coming to. She's like the voice of like, you can rely on me because everything's gonna be okay. It's all gonna be okay. Just relax. Hate politicians. That's first of all. So just from a debating perspective, again, it depends who you are. Like if you just want calm, and you're just calm, then you hear like Lee Zeldin yelling about the end of the world, and then you hear Kathy Hochul like being like, everything's okay, and I support education. Every day I wake up in the morning. It's just like it's much more calming than Lee Zeldin. So that's step one. Let's go to the next. So fine. So a lot of the governor race in New York has been about crime. And one of the highlights in crime, in the rising crime in New York, has been blamed on this thing, this law that was passed called cashless bail. Okay? Now, what is cashless bail? Let's get very clear. Cashless bail means that if a criminal person does a crime and they're arrested for doing the crime, if they are able to go free from being in jail, meaning they don't have to be in jail, they can go free, they can post bail, as it's called, and then they just go back for free, and then they go to the court when their court date is. Okay? So again, usually in other states what happens is that you get arrested for, let's say, robbery, you go to jail, and in order to get out of jail until the court date, you have to pay bail or post bail, which, could be thousands and thousands of dollars. In New York, they have a law that you don't have to pay any bail, and it's free to go out of jail until your court date. And then the court date, they decide whatever your punishment is. Let's say it is jail, then you go to jail. So that's what cashless bail is. And the highlight of like the rising crime in New York has been blamed on cashless bail. There's a small problem. The problem is that if you look at the statistics, people that are let out due to cashless bail actually get arrested at the same rate as before cashless bail. And the moderator for this debate actually asked Lee Zeldin, he's like, Lee, like Mr. Zeldin, like you're yelling about cashless bail so much, but like if you look at statistics, cashless bail doesn't actually cause more crime. In fact, people are being arrested after bail at the same rate as before cashless bail. So like, what are you making such a big deal out of cashless bail for? And here's his answer.
Going this morning, crime and public safety are one of the top issues in this race. You've promised, if elected, to invoke a state of emergency on crime and suspend several laws, including bail reform measures, in order to improve public safety. But our state's Division of Criminal Justice Services,
Listen
which
to
tracks
this.
statistics, says that it's too early to draw conclusions, pointing out that in 2019, prior to bail reform, the rate of rearrests of people out on bail in New York City was roughly 19% and remains statistically the same at around 20% in 2021 after bail reform. DCJS, this division, of course, maintains the DNA database, administers the sex offender registry and the missing persons clearinghouse. My question is, if you become governor, would you make policy despite the agency's findings?
Again, the moderator is saying very clearly that it doesn't seem like cashless bail is making arrests or making crime surge. So you, Mr. Zeldin, who's running for governor, who is running on the platform that if you get elected, you're going to suspend several laws that were passed by New York legislation, and one of those laws that you want to suspend is cashless bail, you better gosh darn have a good reason as to why you're suspending bail. And not just suspending it just because you're just going to take authoritarian power and just suspend any laws you want, because that's authoritarianism. And after I heard this answer, I was going to vote for Lee Zeldin at first. After I heard this answer, I was like, hold on a minute. Hold on. This guy is an authoritarian. Listen to his answer. Again, he's asked very clearly. Doesn't look like cashless bail is making crime go up. So why do you want to suspend cashless bail? Here's his answer.
Well, listen, you ask the will of the people, they want to see reform. Even Mayor Adams says that judges should have discretion to weigh dangerousness. I don't think that if you're two Mexican cartel drug smugglers busted with $1.2 million worth of crystal meth, that you should just be instantly released on cashless bail. Now, Kathy Hochul supports cashless bail. As soon as it got implemented, she was out there bragging about it. She chose the champion of the defund the police movement and the architect of cashless bail, Brian Benjamin. Yeah, that guy who got arrested and had to resign. That was her first big decision to make him the lieutenant governor. We need to repeal cashless bail. We need to repeal the
Pause
whole
it.
act.
Did you hear anything there about why we have to suspend cashless bail? Anything at all? First of all, in classic politician form, he goes, the will of the people. Like, that's his first thing. The will of the people is that they want bail reform. Yes, and guess what? The will of the people voted for bail reform back in 2019, and they voted for cashless bail. So you're going to become governor and just override the will of the people? And then you quote Mayor Adams as like, oh, even Mayor Adams is on my side. No, Mayor Adams is not on your side. He, again, is a mayor of a city that voted for cashless bail. So no, you can't go ahead with your authoritarian power for no reason that you stated. He did not state any reason why he would suspend cashless bail, but he threw out a whole bunch of buzzwords. Oh, the DA. Oh, Kathy Hochul is for cashless bail. Oh, the cartel was released on cashless bail. It's like, but you're not saying why suspending cashless bail would make crime go down. It's not evident that suspending cashless bail, which means actually charging people to come out of jail, is going to make crime go down. It's not evident that is the case. So you're going to become an authoritarian for no basis whatsoever. You're completely manufacturing this crisis that cashless bail is somehow making crime go up when you can't even support why you would suspend it. You don't have to play it. It was when I heard this, I was very turned off by Lee Zeldin. Very turned off. But let's play another clip that I was also very turned off by. Okay, Alvin Bragg. One second. Let's talk about this for a second. So this guy, Alvin Bragg, okay, who is he? He is the Manhattan DA for one of the districts in Manhattan. What is a DA? District Attorney. Basically, the Attorney General is for the whole state. The District Attorney is for the district. He prosecutes crime in whatever district he's in. So he's an attorney in Manhattan. Okay, this guy, Alvin Bragg. Okay, first, the first thing that I want to talk about is Alvin Bragg, was elected into his office. Now, he wasn't just elected into his office, okay? He won 83% of the vote. 83% of the vote he won. 182,000, almost 183,000 votes to 36,000 votes. He ran against this guy, Thomas Kinniff. Okay? 183,000 to 36,500. Alvin Bragg won 83% of the vote. He was elected into his office, not only just elected, totally, over majority elected into his office. Okay? Now, what happened with this guy, Alvin Bragg, that makes him the topic of this conversation in a governor race? The Jose Alba case. The Jose Alba case was as follows. I'm going to read this straight off of Wikipedia and you'll know exactly what happened. On July 7th, 2022, Jose Alba, a bodega clerk, was attacked by a customer in a dispute over a bag of potato chips. I'm not going to make a joke here because it's a pretty terrible thing that happens. Okay. Alba attempted to de-escalate. Alba, again, is the clerk, the bodega clerk. But after being shoved into a wall, Alba defended himself with a knife, killing the assailant. He killed the guy after he was pushed against the wall. Bragg, the DA, in his prosecutorial discretion, decided to charge the clerk and requested bail of $500,000, and the judge set it to $250,000. The dead attacker's girlfriend also stabbed Alba with her own knife after attempting to turn Alba's knife back onto him. Bragg declined to charge her. Okay, so again, you have a guy, he's running a store. The guy comes in, something happens about potato chips. The guy who came in pushes the clerk against the wall. The clerk takes a knife out, stabs the guy. The girlfriend comes, takes that knife that he stabbed him with, tries to stab him. The DA comes along, prosecutes the clerk for defending himself, and does not prosecute the girlfriend. And and there was an intense backlash, and Bragg ultimately decided to drop charges against Alba, noting that a homicide case against Alba cannot be proven at trial beyond a reasonable doubt. Meaning you had to prove that this clerk was out to kill this guy, so that couldn't be proven, so Bragg dropped the case. That's this whole blow-up against this DA Bragg guy. Now, would I vote for this guy again? Absolutely not. I would not vote for a guy who tries to prosecute a person who tried to defend himself with a knife, defend them in self-defense. I would not vote for that DA again. However, he was elected by the people. Now listen to what Lee Zeldin wants to do with this guy.
I want to follow up with you, Mr. Zeldin. You have vowed to remove the district attorney of the county where we're in right now, Alvin Bragg of Manhattan, on day one, if elected as governor. Of course, he is an elected official, and the state constitution specifies that removing a DA is not simple and is not automatic.
Yeah, can we actually pause that for a second? Let's just talk about that for a second. Again, the governor of the state cannot just remove elected officials. In order to remove them, they have to bring almost like prosecute them and bring them to court, saying that they don't follow the law, basically. That's what in order for a governor to remove a DA, the governor has to prove in court that the DA doesn't actually follow the laws of the state. Now, it's not so simple to do that, and let's hear why Lee Zeldin wants to just authoritarian, just boom, remove the DA. Let's hear it.
Requires specific charges of wrongdoing, not just a difference of opinion.
Correct.
And the official in question must have a chance to defend themselves formally. What specific conduct are you alleging the district attorney has engaged in?
Absolutely. The first thing I'll do right after I'm sworn into office is turning the Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg to let him know that he's being removed. And it's from day one that he was a district attorney. He said that he was not going to enforce all different kinds of laws across the board. Others he treat as lesser offenses. Look what happened to Jose Alba.
Yeah.
He gets attacked. He's defending himself. Alvin Bragg sends him to Rikers Island, slaps him with a murder charge. He had an open...
Pause it for a second. Again, the moderator asked him for a specific instance in which Alvin Bragg did not follow the law of the state. Lee Zeldin has not said a specific instance where Alvin Bragg has not followed the law of the state. All that happens is that he brings up this case of where he very, very wrongly prosecuted this bodega clerk. But Lee Zeldin did not say specifically why he would just, again, in an authoritarian manner, just totally fire Alvin Bragg.
Alvin Bragg asked for hundreds of thousands thousands of dollars in bail in this case, but doesn't go after the person who stabbed Jose Alba. We reached the point
Yeah, his
where
girlfriend.
Jose Alba said that he needed to go back to the Dominican Republic because he didn't feel safe here. Alvin Bragg is not doing his job. The message will absolutely be sent that if you're the DA, it stands for District Attorney, not Defense Attorney. Alvin Bragg can go be a defense attorney, but if he's not going to do his job, I'm going to do my job, and I'm going to remove him as soon as I can.
Okay, pause it. Very, very not convincing. And I was very turned off with Lee Zeldin. And I watched the debate. It was a few weeks ago. From the debate, basically until today, I was not going to vote for Lee Zeldin based off of these stances. Like, he is an authoritarian. Now, I'm not saying that Kathy Hochul is better. I'm not. I think she is just irresponsible with spending. I think she's irresponsible with the crime in this state. And I don't think she's not necessarily, I'm not going to vote for her either. It was basically one chart. It was one chart that made me change my mind about Lee Zeldin. And it's not because I necessarily support him. I want to state that for record. I don't support him. I am very turned off by the fact that he's authoritarian like this, and he just willy-nilly just wants to override elected officials and just do whatever he wants in the state. I was very turned off by that. There's one chart that made me change my mind and why I will vote for Lee Zeldin. And this is the NYPD crime tracker. So very interesting to see this chart. Basically, the NYPD has a very, very advanced system that keeps track of all the crimes in New York City. And just over time, year over year, so in 2021, there were 413 murders. In 2022, until November, that is, there was 356 murders, and that went down 13%. But besides that, every other crime is up. Every other crime. Rape is up. In 2021, there were 1,200 rapes. In 2022, there were almost 1,400 rapes. Robbery, in 2021, there was 11,000 robberies. In 2022, there were 14,500 robberies. And the total crime, I mean, just the major seven, right? Murder, rape, robbery, felony assault, burglary, grand larceny auto. The total crime in 2021 was 81,000 crimes. In 2022, and we're only up to November, has been 105,000 crimes. And what really, really convinced me that crime is totally out of control is this other chart that is year over year of total crime in the city, and you have basically a downward slope. It looks like the real tracking started in 1996. It's really where like this tracking started. Basically from 1996 all the way until 2021, it's just been a total downward slope, total and absolute downward slope. And then in 2022, you see this rocket. It just takes off. And it's like more crime than in the past 12, 13, 14, 15 years. And because of that, because of this chart, I'm just going to vote for the candidate that's at least talking about it. And it just seems like Lee Zeldin's the only candidate talking about crime. So that is the reason why I'm voting for him, very reluctantly, with tremendous heaviness in my heart. I have to vote for authoritarian. It's terrible. But this is definitely something. This chart is definitely something for me. So thank you for listening to the 2022 edition of who I am voting for. And I hope to make more episodes of the Avichal Show together with the Fourth Branch in the future. So tune in next time, and you can support me. You can send me money. You could actually. I think you could support me on Spotify. If you go to Spotify, the Fourth Branch, then you can actually send money. So support me. And see you next time. Peace.